And here we go.
Coming to you live is the Auto Hub Show, changing automotive one show at a time with Ian and Jeff. And here we go.
Who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Hi, I'm Gayla Rubenstein, the founder and CEO of a company called Retail Resilient, social selling for the car industry. And we help auto dealers, auto agencies, and vendors in the auto industry sell more cars, service more cars, and make more money using our social selling strategy. That includes TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and anything else you can think of. So if you're looking to invest thousands and make millions, we're definitely the social selling company for you. Like I said, who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
If you run a service drive, you know these days first impressions matter. But when your advisors are tied up with inbound phone calls, they tend to neglect their other, more important duties. And did you know 75% of all service calls are frequently asked questions and routine requests? Still, the average dealer misses up to 30% of inbound calls, adding up to a ton of missed service opportunity and increased customer churn. 68% of callers actually go elsewhere if they can't get through, which means you could be losing $60,000 to $70,000 every month in service revenue simply from missing calls. So who will pick up? Introducing Brooke.
Hi there.
Your best service scheduling assistant. Brooke is the first intelligent digital voice assistant to answer, handle, and appoint all of your inbound service calls. And talking to Brooke is like talking to a friend with human-level understanding and a friendly conversational voice. Her conversational intelligence is built on millions of actual service industry conversations. Book with Brooke today. Visit Brooke.ai or call 866-942-1236. Finally, the perfect match.
Our goals are always to improve. Every month we want to improve better on what we did the month before, maybe the year before. It's about how fast we can get the cars done with quality work to get it to the front line, because that's where we make our money. And the bottom line is the longer it takes, the more money you spend. We want to get it down as low as possible. Right now, like I said, we're in a great stage. We're at 4.5 days. In recon, we want to know how quickly we can get the cars out of the recon process and to the front line. The average days in recon and then the time to line are the most important things that we look for. I'm Mike Burrell, and Service Director at JM Lexus.
Larry Feldman is probably the most amazing trainer that I've ever experienced in this business. I've been in the car business now for 35 years, and I've seen quite a few trainers. A lot of them are pretty good. I mean, really, I get something out of all of them that I've seen, really. But Larry is in another class. I really mean that. His training is literally riveting. A little while back, I sat in on his first training that I ever sat in on. It was for new hires. I still remember, I'll never forget it. About 25 people in the room who'd never sold cars before. And after 2 hours, I raised my hand. Larry stopped what he's doing and said, yes. And I said, maybe we should take a break. And literally, I'll never forget it. All 25 people turned around, looked at me, and went, well, okay. And he kept going for another 2 hours. Since then, I've seen a few other of his trainings. I've hired people out of his classes. All I can say is, you got to give him a try.
All righty. Good morning. So go ahead, Mr. Jeff, with our disclaimer.
Oh, do I have to? Boy, oh boy, I just got to pass the buck and tell everybody that that we have no responsibility for anything that's said on the show. Actually, officially, our disclaimer is the views and opinions shared on this show are those of our guests and not necessarily of that of the Auto Hub Show or Ian and Jeff.
Thank you.
And by the way, good morning, everybody.
Morning. So I picked a few books. There's so many books on change. These are just a few. Drive by Daniel Pink, Simon Sinek, and Primal Leadership, talking a little bit about change. Obviously, change is constant and accelerating. We were just in San Diego. If you haven't checked out the video on our site, is an interview with one of the co-founders of Carvana, also known as Darth Vader by some people. Really interesting, but also if you're interested in Steve's slide deck, let me know from the show. It was really interesting, just some data on change. So we're talking about change today, so let's get into it.
Well, yeah, it's about change. It's about where, what have we learned in 2022? And joining us today, boy, oh boy, we got a great couple of gentlemen, plus some good friends of the show too, joining us. And first of all, we're going to introduce somebody who's new to the Monday show of the Auto Hub show, Jim Johnson from VDX TV. Officially the term I don't know, and if I forgot a dot, I'm sorry. Jim, would you mind introducing yourself? Tell us where you're joining us from and tell us a little bit about you and the company.
Absolutely. So hello everyone, my name is Jim Johnson. I am the VP of Account Planning with VDX.TV. We are a digital marketing company I'm based in Los Angeles, California. My company's in the Bay Area near San Francisco. So we do a lot of work with OEMs, dealerships, tier 2, all of the above on their video marketing efforts. We find out who is buying their products, and we try to find them more customers at the end of the day. We're a marketing company, and that's kind of who we service. So that's me, and I appreciate the invite.
Perfect. Well, thank you, and thanks for joining us. We're looking forward to your input. Joining us next is from a teeny tiny little town, my favorite name of any place I've had it on here, Bonita Springs, Florida, is our good friend Don Graff of Graff Performance Automotive Matrix and stuff and training and all that other stuff. Don, say hi and tell us a little bit more.
Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Fantastic. Thank you.
Good. Excited to be here today.
Great. Well, we're excited to have you. And even though not official guests, I just acknowledge our friend Tim Hayden from the little tiny place called Texas. And thanks, Doug, for listening in. And we'll get right into it because I'm going to ask you guys each a question here. Just normally I ask you to introduce yourself and then hit you with the question at the same time. But the first question is, with inventory shortages, franchise actions, roller coaster used wholesale and retail valuations, and of course the famous how much over MSRP can I get for my in-stock unit, and fees, and our favorite being hot dog fees, which we came up with at Used Car Week. What have we learned anything in 2022? Jim, I'll start with you.
It's a really good question. With all of this change, one would hope that we did learn a few things along the way. And I think it comes down to the intangibles. So it's resilience, number one, is kind of the word that I think of for 2022. We were forced to be resilient in ways that we hadn't before. So from a consumer perspective, we had to learn how to wait and be patient for the right car at the right price. And that was a difficult exercise for a lot of consumers who are used to kind of walking onto the lot, picking out of a lineup and saying, I'm driving home with this one today. That was a huge departure from the norm. And I think we saw a lot of introduction of digital tools and pre-ordering and customization come out of that. So people were more willing to play with the tools that are more traditional to the retail industry. How do we sort of piece together a vehicle that's right for us and be willing to wait a few months for it? That was really interesting. And that required, again, a level of patience and resilience from the consumer side. On the manufacturer side, I think the resilience came into play when the whole sort of just-in-time supply chain logistics notion really came into question. I mean, the modern auto industry is sort of built upon this model of getting the parts right in time when they're needed, and then you kind of piece it together, and then you have a car that goes out the door to the dealers. But that was put into question, and the question was, is this the right model for the future of the car industry? And I think it's probably still TBD. It does have its use, but I think we've seen a lot of after effects of that, right? Globalization is being also called into question. Maybe we sort of move a lot more manufacturing domestically. Maybe we look at something where we stockpile parts for the inevitable next pandemic or some other issue with supply chains. So I think resilience kind of played into the cadence for a lot of consumers and manufacturers and dealers alike. We just had to learn how to be patient and kind of wait our turn, so to speak. And that was a big change from the years past when it seemed like everything was ready when we needed it.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking.
Well, I have to say, one of my favorite things that came out of this is when the big fancy negotiator guy walks into the store and says, all right, I got to tell you, I got your invoice press in your car. Please forgive me, Tim. I want to know this, and here's what I'm going to pay, and you're going to take it. And then everybody got to laugh in his face. Don, what's your viewpoint on this? Have we learned anything in 2022?
I have a similar viewpoint to Jim. If you were patient and you searched around, you were able to get a vehicle that was going to fit your needs. However, I feel that a lot of dealers did not learn lessons early in the game. And on myself, my focus is on people, process, finance, and visibility. And I found that a lot of dealers that I had previously, early in the pandemic, either decided that they were going to hibernate, that has become much less visible, or cut their visibility, or not pay attention to what was going on in their BDCs necessarily. They didn't follow their processes. You may remember I did 75 mystery shops and found that 56% of the time, BDCs were abandoning their leads after 3 days or less.
No, but just a second. I mean, I thought the new process is somebody wants to buy a car, just sign their name up for the waiting list, and if you have one, ask them whatever there is. Ian.
Yeah, well, we had an interesting situation happen in our market that was all over the news. It was kind of interesting. So it was a gentleman who owned a 17-year-old Kia sedan. I didn't know they lasted that long, but anyway, he'd ordered a new sedan. I think he ordered a Telluride from a local dealer, agreed on a price. 3 months later, the car arrived. So they said, oh, we'd love to sell it to you, but by the way, the prices went up $5,000. And, of course, the news people were reaching out to the manufacturer, and they're reaching out to the licensing body in Ontario, which is called OMVIC. And everyone was pointing fingers at each other going, well, they actually have the right to change the contract within, if it's over 3 months, which I thought was kind of interesting in the market we're in. But more importantly, I've heard of other cases where, in addition to hot dog fees, which we all know are rampant, there's also fees around, oh, well, if you want to take it, no problem. You just have to take this extended warranty with it. That's just included. So it was kind of interesting, just even in the market where traditionally we haven't been charging over MSRP, even here the dealers are going, well, we only have a limited amount of cars, so we're going to maximize this opportunity. And it was interesting. There was a poll this morning on LinkedIn, which I'll share, but essentially, what are the top 3 things the auto retail industry has learned? And this was kind of interesting because it was about disruption. So I'll share it really quick. It isn't completed yet, but it's from Brett Sutherland. He's already got almost 262 votes over 6 days. And car subscriptions and direct-to-customer sales are the top 2 results so far. So what that should tell dealers is they better be careful because people are looking at different models right now. And the thing that was really interesting from Used Car Week was just the way the OEMs are looking at changing revenue as they adapt to used cars, not only from a dealership perspective, but also from an other perspective. So a couple of the key takeaways were over-the-car updates that the dealer could then save money on, and that the customers wouldn't have to go to a dealer. And the second one, which was really interesting, was one of the dealers that the gentleman worked with got an email from the manufacturer that one of their customers had been charged for extra EV range on a car that he didn't realize he had extra EV range. He ran out, so he called support, and they said, oh yeah, for a one-time fee of $500, we'll give you an extra 100 miles range on your electric car. And the dealer not only didn't know about this going on, didn't know that it even happened until after the fact. So the first question was, okay, what's the revenue, and do I get any of that revenue? But it was really interesting just how the dealers were looking at ways to change, but the manufacturer is also changing that game in real time. So what do you think people have learned about change in the top 3 things in 2022? Let's start with Don.
I was not aware of that. That's really very interesting.
Oh yeah.
And I don't find, you had dealers on one hand that were changing to mirror their customers' concerns and interests very quickly, and you had others that were burying their heads in the sand and making maximum profits. I'd be curious to find out how many others in the room or online saw that over the last year and a half.
Jim, what did you think?
I think you underscore a really good point in that there has to be closer coordination between the OEM and the dealers and consumers. I mean, everybody plays a role in this, right? So this whole idea of, we're leading with technology in the vehicle. It's going to be a more personalized experience. All of your preferences will be like stored in the mainframe of the car. So as you get in, it'll be a very different driving experience than your wife or your friends or whoever else drives the vehicle. That is a steep learning curve, I think, for consumers and dealers alike. And it's incumbent, I think, upon the manufacturer to explain those technological innovations in great detail. And again, arm the dealers to be consultants on this so that the expectations of the consumer are set properly. There cannot be this idea of, I got this big surprise today and it's going to cost me $500, right? That is just not something that consumers are willing to tolerate very much anymore. Everything is very transparent in the consumer space. They have tons of information at their fingertips, and they have these platforms that we all hear about on a daily basis where they can share the bad experiences that occur. So that is not a good look for anybody involved in that whole supply chain and that whole, consumer process. So we need to be very careful about setting the consumer expectations correctly and giving them a direct line to the dealers, who I think will act as consultants on their behalf to say, here's what's upcoming as far as your vehicle. These are the updates. Here's what to know about them. Hopefully there's better coordination in the future so these things can be avoided, because they will happen. These hiccups will occur, but the sooner we can kind of stem them, the better for all of us.
Well, I was comparing this to, thanks for that. I was comparing this to that incident a couple of years ago where a gentleman with his Apple iPhone figured out that when you updated, it reduced the battery life. And then Apple had to do an end run. But I'm sitting there going, okay, what if I bought an iPhone 14 or whatever the latest thing is, or a Samsung, and I charged it every day, and then I realized I was only getting 80% of the charge when I used it, but I could get 100%, but I had to pay for that. I thought that was really interesting, and it's sort of in line with, I'm not sure if anyone heard about the heated rear seat subscription model, but the manufacturers are looking for ways to drive recurring revenue, but more importantly, maybe to cut out the dealers. There's not a lot of discussion there, but it's clearly interesting that they're looking for ways to maximize revenue on electric cars and elsewhere as the model continues to change. And another interesting one that came from Used Car Week, which was really interesting on the Tesla front, was Tesla was unable to sell cars in certain US states. Well, they've done an end run around this by selling it through native reserves, which I thought was really an interesting twist. And obviously, all the OEMs are looking at this as Musk and the boys blaze a trail. But the most interesting one recently was VinFast, who's now launching cars in North America and is delivering to the US right now. So it'll be really interesting to see if the Vietnamese with VinFast blaze a trail for the Chinese, who I'm sure will be the next volley. So go ahead, Jeff.
Well, actually, the beauty of VinFast is which I'm discovering now, being in the used car business, is they lease batteries. So you get your car, you get your battery, and then in whatever period of time, I don't know the details, you redo a lease, give them your battery back, get a new one. And I'm starting to look at taking in some used electric cars, and out of 10 that I bought recently, I've only been able to keep one because the batteries are basically toast. So that's a very interesting thing. And so, as we go forward to 2023, truly, and we're just making this comment right now, about OEMs, about customers, about that survey. Right now, it kind of sounds like the fella from WWE, should be at the entrance to every dealer as you open the door. Ladies and gentlemen,
oh, what happened?
Did I cut out?
Yeah, it was too much voice.
Yeah, I was commenting to Ian earlier that some of the stuff got cut out, but so I think the system does not like. Anyways, so moving on to 2023, who's going to be driving the change? The OEMs, the dealers, or the consumers? Don, I'm going to hit you with that one.
Wow. It's interesting. Usually it's a consumer at some level is finding something interesting or scientifically what's going on in the marketplace, and they spur the OEM to bring that change to the marketplace. I think someone like Tim is on the cutting edge usually, and may be able to provide some guidance.
Tim?
You're muted.
Let me cutting edge of muting myself. Yeah. No, I think, Ian, you hit the nail on the head when you were looking at that LinkedIn poll, right? Where it led off with direct to consumer and auto subscription, right? Vehicle subscription plans. When we have this question, is it the OEM, is it the dealer, is it the consumer that's driving it? It's everybody driving it, but really the consumer drives everybody. The consumer is being shaped and forged into new behaviors by folks that have nothing to do with the automobile industry. And then everybody who's all about cars. So just look at Turo, for instance, right? Explosive growth, people building cottage businesses around Turo to where it doesn't matter where you live, you're going to find that you can have the car that you want at the rate that you want and have it delivered to your house and use it for just a day. That changes a certain view of owning a car, a certain view, not everything, right? I'm not saying that Turo by itself is going to change everything, but when you figure what Amazon and what our grocery stores have done with curbside pickup, what Open Table and Resy have done to allow us to not have to walk into a restaurant to get on the waiting list, not make a reservation, but just to get on the waiting list, right? It's all about that personalization. It's about some of the stuff Jim was talking about earlier, right? It's leveraging technology better than that, data and intelligence, to deliver an extremely personalized and relevant experience. And I think, again, I'll restate what Jim said. This is going to be a hard pivot for dealers to deliver on that, and even harder for them to explain how they can deliver it to consumers.
Hey, Tim, can I jump in for a second and just make a comment? So you made an interesting point. You talked about this whole notion of shared mobility. And then Peter made a comment about he was in the mineral business. It doesn't look like we might have the supply of minerals to sort of fuel this EV growth. And doesn't that play into this whole notion of shared mobility? So maybe it's not about building a car for every single person that needs to drive in the future. Maybe due to this lack of resources, now it's more of a shared mobility model where we build a certain number of vehicles based on how people need to get around. I think that those two might play a little bit better in the future than we can anticipate right now.
Yeah,
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that's and Peter, I don't want to talk over you because you led with those things, but I was right behind you saying lithium is only around for 3 to 5 years, right? It's not that we don't have as much of it or as much access to it because of some of the countries where it's plentiful, right? There's some geopolitical things that are at play there as well. But it's that there's lots of other movement in the space of hydrogen, in the space of nickel, in the space of other things, solar even, which I think is further afield than a lot of people think. But there's a number of things that'll change that. But to your point, Jim, not everybody needs a depreciating asset in their driveway that sits there, for the majority of the time, or in their parking garage the majority of the time, or at the airport the majority of the time. I think folks are starting to wisen up a little bit. That's why we have Uber and Lyft. That's the market they serve. It's what Turo is doing right now as well. All these things reshape the idea of owning a vehicle, or just owning a vehicle for the time and the place that you need it.
100%. I mean, the other thing that was really interesting from a statistics point of view, from the dealership body, but also from the OEM, from Used Car Week, that part of that same deck, was the unfilled orders for fleet, not consumer, but fleet. But more importantly, when you look at shared usage and you look at the fact that most cars spend 5 to 8 hours a day sitting there, that makes a lot of sense as soon as the technology comes to bear. But Turo has already proven that. But when you look at models like Airbnb and other, I mean, that's already a proven model. The question is, will that millennial or Gen Z do that versus owning a car? As cars become 9 or 10% interest, I can see that happening. But go ahead, Jeff.
Well, it's interesting too, because there's so many different models today, and I had to have a chuckle because we're talking about car share, et cetera. And up here, we've got a very big operator, which is part of the AAA network of things that operates car shares, and they have a fleet of probably 2,500, 3,000 Priuses and 5 Hyundai Konas EVs, and they're getting used a lot. They're running 19 hours a day, and I actually used one the other day, and it was a 2017 Prius C with about 100,000 miles on it, and it's the worst Toyota I've ever driven because it was rattly, it was banging, because it's driven by bad people who don't know how to drive, and for about a 7-minute drive and over whatever they have there. So the question is actually, it's very funny, Peter. You mentioned this thing about lithium. And Ian and I are talking about 2023 shows, so we're going to speak using our Ready to Rumble thing. We're going to have you and James Carter on in a future show. And those of you who don't know James is an EV evangelist. Like really, he's a wonderful guy. And I could picture him on a stage in a suit with big smile on his face and saying, in the morning, you must get up and go, Elon, Elon, Elon. And, he really loves to post against hydrogen, against everything that the EVs are here. And this thing about lithium digging up 17 million acres to get, enough stuff for a battery is wrong. And Peter posts about lithium. So it's going to be very interesting. But getting back on topic, it's very interesting because this change is being driven from all sorts of angles. I don't know. This is, at first I'm saying, I've always thought consumers drive change. Consumers control everything, but consumers can only get what they get. And Peter mentioned about the $1,200 performance upgrade. And Ian, if you only pay $1,000, we'll give you a little more range, etc. As we go to cars that everything's controlled from a screen, and all the new stuff that's come out, the only car I've seen is Lucid that actually has buttons. Even your power seat, they have buttons, but the others has to be done through a screen. So is this what it's going to be? Is it going to be, if you don't pay your monthly subscription, you don't get a heater, you don't get air conditioning? And Jim, what do you think?
That is an extremely hot topic right now. And the question is consumer willingness. How much are consumers willing to absorb these? And some people call them hidden fees. They're hidden if they're not disclosed, right? So I think we need to be careful about disclosure. These are the things that come standard and stock, and these are the things that can be upgraded. And here's the price. Again, transparency is going to be huge in this new environment. People need to understand exactly what they're getting into, right, when they purchase these vehicles. So I think the auto industry is borrowing a little bit from the gaming industry in that you buy this game and you don't have to actually pay anything. It's free. The freemium model is what they call it. So everything that you do within the game is an upgrade. And I think the OEMs are borrowing a page from that. But again, with the BMW example, I think with the heated seats, there was a little bit of consumer backlash, and I think they had to back off from it pretty quickly. So I think there'll be a lot of stops and starts. 2023 is definitely going to be the year when I think there'll be a lot of testing in the space. And it's a little bit of push and pull. Consumers will dictate how much they're willing to pay and what they're willing to pay for. And then the OEMs will have to decide, with this new idea of connected services and this new revenue model, how much can we actually realistically upcharge before consumers start to really revolt and choose alternative transportation models?
Yeah, that makes sense. Here's something that I'm starting to think about here right now while we're talking. I can see manufacturers offering decontented cars. So they look really good. They got all this really funky stuff on the car, but the basics are going to be extra cost. The heated seats, all this stuff now with the backup camera showing as the rear view mirror.
Speakers instead of 4, all those kind of things.
What was that, Don?
6 speakers instead of 4 speakers, all those.
Oh, everything.
But it also makes sense,
I mean,
Jeff,
we've talked about it many a time with the person who bought a used Tesla, and right on the screen had the icon for the the autopilot, and they get on the highway, they hit autopilot, it went, I think they should have that giant skull and crossbones. It's scary. I mean, I'll just open that up to everybody there. You're getting a little bit concerned as to, truly the big bad dealer isn't the one here, is it?
But it makes sense though, Jeff. Instead of building a whole bunch of trim levels and then hoping you can sell them, if you build one trim level and then sell the options, it makes sense. The question is whether consumers will bite into that and say, yeah, that works for me. I mean, it's not really a secret that manufacturers historically have built a lot of vehicles and then hope to sell them with incentives. If you only built one model and then basically that customer could then apply the features they want on a monthly, yearly, annual basis. But the big question is, can those dealers explain that? And will the consumers backlash against that? I mean, it's not like Tesla does that on some features, but their cars come full feature. But that model of building one trim level that then has these options as opposed to multiple trim levels make sense as you look at just cost of building vehicels.
Yeah,
What do you
Peter's
do?
got a
Roll
big light
into
bulb
the
above his head.
roll into service and get your features put in, your extra dials. What?
Yeah. Peter, you made a comment like to do that mute button.
You're muted. You're still muted. Oh, there you go.
My apologies. As most of you know, I've been driving Teslas for the last 5 years, and I'm quite versed on them. I've had 4 of them in 5 years. So Tesla's model is basically everything can be upgraded over the air. So if you want the autopilot, it's already on the car. They just turn it on. You pay an exorbitant amount of money, and then if you want Autopilot Plus, you pay them exorbitant amount of money on top of that, and so on and so on. Depending on what level you want to get to. It's all in the car. They do it in a specific manner to increase the line speed, not the quality, but the line speed, so they can get the cars out. On Saturday, I was in one of the biggest BMW dealerships in the GTA here, and talking about the model moving forward. And it just so happened the show was on Monday, so it worked out perfectly. BMW is looking at a consumer experience model as an OEM. The dealerships are looking at an inventory model as a dealer, and the consumers are looking at, I need a car now model, and how can you solve that? All 3 of those models don't work, and especially when you mold them all together. Now, BMW and most of the higher end, like BMW, Porsche, and I'll use Jeep, have an exorbitant amount of options and accessories that you can put on, because those 3 manufacturers have personalization issues with their consumers, because they want one-of-ones. They want it built to them. Aston Martin, Ferrari, they do the same. They're bespoke cars. But BMW, I'll take Porsche. Porsche is one of the few manufacturers in the world that you can buy a base car. And I mean, a base Macan is $60,000. And then you can put $60,000 worth of options on it from the factory and double your price of your car. So you can build it any way you want. You just have to wait for it. And Porsche owners get that. Other manufacturers, they don't. So how do you build out an inventory for a dealer, not worry about their floor plans, and because they're the ones that are going to carry the floor plans, and they have to have, and BMW has, I think, 112 different models now. How do you carry that amount of inventory? And then the chances of the options and colors and everything else, you're into millions and millions of dollars of dead inventory just to satisfy the consumer. I had this discussion and I said, you're going to go to an order only basis, and the manufacturer is going to have to supply you with the models so that you can go to an order only basis and educate the consumer so that they know that they have a 6-month wait or whatever wait it is based on the manufacturer and the availability of supply. And German cars are getting killed because of Ukraine and the wiring harnesses. The Japanese are getting killed because of the chips. So are the North Americans. The only company that seems to be doing well on that is Chrysler. And I don't know how they're doing it with their days in supply. You go
Well,
to
don't
Chrysler,
forget with Chrysler is their model is keep running the plants for the old product. They
yeah,
still got the old Ram, they still got the old Grand Cherokee out there too, and that's
Yeah.
filling up the lots.
yeah. And the Jeep is as a basic as a vehicle as it gets. So they're winning the marketplace right now.
And there's even
Got a
talk
good
about
laugh,
chips.
You were
adding the
telling,
chips
I know
later.
you have a Wrangler plug-in, but I have a good laugh. Not far from me is a street side charging station. There's 4 or 5 of them there. And I always see this Wrangler plug-in hybrid there with 37-inch tires on it, a big lift. They're knobby tires. And we know his range is about, for our American friends, it's about 15, maybe 20 miles on electric, because that just goes right out the window. Ian, let's move along.
Yeah, I mean, if you could find one thing to make the industry better, if you could name one thing that can make the industry better in 2023, what would it be? And let's start with Don.
Let's start with Don. One thing that would make the industry better?
Yeah.
Wow. Better supply chain.
Okay. So if you were to solve that problem, how would you do it?
How would I solve it?
It's easy to say something now. It's sort of
Yeah,
like,
let's
this is
get
like
those
sharing your
goddamn
work in
chips.
school.
Let's get those chips.
Not a
Yeah,
problem.
let Amazon carry it.
Yeah.
Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to go back to my earlier point of transparency. I think it's just really transparency up and down the supply chain, what inventory levels look like, what the pricing options are, what the availability of certain things are for consumers. The more transparent the industry can become with each other, from OEM down to dealer to consumer, the better we'll all be, because I think there were a lot of sort of, like you alluded to, some mysteries this year that were uncovered through consumers basically finding out something at the end of the day and not really understanding it or not knowing where it came from. So the more that we can be upfront and transparent with all of this information as we sort of move ahead into what the future looks like, which is shared mobility, which is a very technologically advanced type of driving experience. A lot of consumers out there just don't really know very much about technology, about EVs. They have very little knowledge of that. We've grown up in an era where you drive down the street, you fill up your gas tank, and you kind of move on, and you get your car serviced every 3 months. That era is slowly but surely ending, and there's going to be a huge and very steep learning curve for people who drive long distances to work and other places every day. So the more we can be transparent again, and the more we can educate, and that's where I come in. I do marketing. So a lot of what we're doing right now is consumer education. It's not necessarily about selling a vehicle. It's more about educating them on pricing and availability and the latest tech upgrades in cars. All of that stuff is helping. We see it in our survey data. Consumers appreciate that. So transparency is kind of where I net out.
Peter or Tim or Larry or Sue?
Go ahead,
Comments?
Tim.
Tim, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Well, no, I think transparency is there. I think, we've got an FTC rule that no one's mentioned yet that is going to go into effect 6 months into 2023, which I hope dealers heed and finally get their act together and understanding who their customers are. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I don't think most dealers have a clue who's bought from them over the last 10 years, over than some anecdotal views, persona mapping, maybe things that they've done, and maybe a few things the DMS has done to iterate itself to become more informative. But I think at the end of the day, I think this is the year for everything we're talking about. Dealers get serious about digitizing their business. They get real serious about understanding the intelligence they can have on their audiences by digitizing their business.
And is there any comments about that rule and what that means for dealers?
Well, I think dealers are going to push back. NADA has done a fine job of being able to make sure that when the law goes into effect or the rule, it's not a law, when the rule goes into effect on January 1st, that it doesn't have teeth, that there is a 6-month grace period. That's the same way customer data privacy works the world over, really. When these laws come out, there's usually some ramp of 6 to 12 months that is a warning, right? It's heads up to everybody to get their act together. So I think that the problem here is people see it as a bad thing. And my commentary on it is that all this is a recipe for you to get your data in order, to get it structured and clean it up after 10, 15 years of oversubscribing to digital media, social media, and all the other things just to move 2 more chunks of metal per month. That's what needs to happen next year. And the FTC rule is a wonderful prescription for that.
Yeah, we actually implemented something years ago here called the Castle Standard, which is that you had to actually have touched that customer within 6 months to continue to market to them. And the fines,
Right.
I think, were $20,000 or $30,000 after the grace period. And some dealers, believe it or not, still didn't heed the warning. It took them some pain and some cost, but most of them eventually figured it out. And I think it'll probably roll out the same way in the US, much like it did in Europe years ago with their privacy. But Peter, any thoughts?
Well, we touched on supply chain, we touched on education, we touched on data. All encompassing to that, I'm going to give a shout out to Larry here, is we need better training. We need to train our people in everything. We have to train our people on how to educate the consumer. We have to train our people to how to understand that the supply chain issues are there. We have to train our people that how to use the data. We have to train, and the focus point is that is going to be the new king. It's well over cash. It's well over everything else. That is going to be your partner in business. And that partner is going to lead to retention. It's going to lead to satisfaction. It's going to lead to experience. It's going to lead to everything in this business. We're going to be able to isolate the liabilities with data, and we're going to surpass it and get around the obstacles and move forward to the successes. We have to train our people, and that's the paramount of everything right now. Training to understanding, and I was at the Empowerment Auto Conference in Toronto, which was Women in Automotive and DEI, and put on by Hyundai and Kia Canada. And one of the things is they said came out with once the customer is heard, they become a client. So we have to train our customer, our individuals, whatever level they're at, to hear our customers, to focus on their needs, and to supply them with what they're looking for.
Larry, did you want to comment on training? I know you're running around. I don't know if we got him there.
He's also
No.
frozen.
He's frozen.
While we're figuring out if Larry's there, you brought up something earlier there, Peter. You were talking about, Europe having their issues, Japan having their issues. So while you were doing that, I decided to look up vehicle production for 2022. And here's a very shocking fact. And I'm actually going to ask you guys this first before I tell you. Who has built the most cars for 2022? And who's number 2? Jim.
I always default to GM.
No, not what manufacturer. Sorry, what country? What country?
What country? Fair enough. Let's go with an outlier here. Mexico, number 1. Number 2,
Okay.
I'll say South Korea.
Tim?
I'm going to go with the United States and Mexico.
Now watch Peter. Peter?
I'm gonna go with India,
Interesting.
and I'm gonna go with South Korea.
Okay, Don?
I'd go with South Korea and Mexico.
Shocker.
China?
By a margin of almost 3-1, China number 1.
Yeah.
China produced more cars than the next 10 afterwards. So now who knows if this is true, but it makes sense on the volume.
Well,
This
30%
side I
of the
went
cars
to,
sold are
World
China
Pop,
in the world.
What's that?
30% of the cars sold in the world are sold in China. This was from 2019 when I was in market, but it's 30% and growing. And there's 2,800
China,
manufacturers.
of course, they've got a almost 6 billion population, but they produced, according to this site, 26 million cars, and the US 9. Mexico's number 7, Japan's number 3. Now the question is how did they do this? Because all we're hearing about is there's no computer chips, there's no wiring harnesses, but they've managed to produce more than almost everybody else. So let's go with Jim.
I have to owe that to their manufacturing prowess. They just have so much experience in manufacturing and logistics over the years, and they have an incumbent system in place. And it's very, it doesn't have to rely on globalization anymore. They can sufficiently supply all their consumers domestically in their own manufacturing hubs. So I'm going to owe it to that. They've been very steadfast with their material sourcing, and they have a lot of supply in terms of natural resources they can tap into. So that's my answer.
Well,
let me just jump on that. 80% of the strategic minerals that are in a EV battery come out of China. So they have the marketplace. What we also forget is China has probably as many car manufacturers as the world does independently sold in China that we don't know about. So we skip that right off the bat because if we don't see it, we don't know about it, and we don't care about it. And it's unfortunately that's just the way it is.
Well, hey, the city of Guangzhou sells more cars than the entire country of Canada. So, but then again, they got more people.
Yeah, 25 million in that one city. I mean, I was at a car museum in Shanghai, started with the wheel, by the way. They had an exhibit at the end talking about things like airbags and steering wheels. I think Volkswagen's been in market since 1984, but the sheer volume of cars was outstanding. But the other thing that was really interesting was the conversion. People locally were converting things like gas scooters to electric vehicles themselves. So there's definitely a lot of innovation. But the other thing that was really interesting for Shanghai from a historical point of view is there have been people living there for 7,000 years. But when you look at the way they built buildings, say from the 80s to today, the rate of change is dramatic. As you can see today, when even the people in a country where generally there's not a lot of unrest are basically saying, listen, let us build stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out. Go ahead, Larry.
I was in the airport when I heard you guys asking what would be a great change or something you'd like to see.
Yeah.
How about human being training? How about dealing with people on a real level and being friendly and answering your phone? Because I'm leaving all my politics out. Disney used to be known as the friendliest place on earth. They got very political. I'm not saying which side. And all of a sudden the stock dropped and they got rid of their guy. With all this technology is perfect. It's amazing. But I still think we need to get back to being human and smiling at people and building rapport. I just do. And I think that would be a hell of a change for any industry, particularly this industry, which has been overburdened with way too much profit, which sounds like a great thing until you wake up one day and you can't say it's 10,000 over list. How quickly do you want to take it?
I vote for robots.
Well, that's because I found out recently Jeff is a robot. Ian has to plug him in at night. It's very scary.
And for all these listeners in the Vancouver market, Larry will be appearing live in person. Maybe, Larry, you can give them some dates just in case they haven't signed up already.
Sure. I believe the 13th is Tuesday. I'm going to be doing 2 seminars promoted by the world famous John Kostakis. And we are going to give human being lessons. We are going to show them how to think and how to smile and how to behave in a way where you're glad to see them come.
Thanks,
and
Larry.
They're going to have 2 very good looking people there greeting people. That would be yours truly and him truly.
And that's right. It'll be Ian and Jeff I suggest everybody come. Everybody that's on the call can come. It's kind of like Springsteen. We're going to charge you a ton for the tickets, but it's going to be okay. I don't have Clarence Clemens either anymore.
And Sue and her
Yeah,
dad, thanks for your thoughts on China. I have to say it was interesting that no one else chose that. But anyway, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I think, frankly, the bottom line here is this. I think we've got to wake up here, and politics aside, because, you know, in the political world right now, China's viewed as the new evil empire. But the fact is they got all these cars, they got all this production capability, and they're already starting to make some inroads in the US and Canada with electrified commercial vehicles, etc. And I think it's not just electrics. I think all they have to do is find some hole in the system here, and they will be shipping cars over here to fill the void. And that's, you know, we're not being
Jeff, maybe they'll use the money, since it's now been determined that they are an underdeveloped nation and we have to pay them climate reparations. So maybe they can help defer the shipping costs.
Don't go there here. We're in Western Canada. Western Canada pays, oh gosh, I bet you $200 or $300 billion a year to support the poor countries of Ontario, the poor provinces of Ontario and Quebec. We do, it's in Canada, they call it the transfer payments. And yet their population, one of them is way more populated than Western Canada. I get the two of them.
Wow.
Yes, that was done by a government a long time ago. We won't get political here. I always give Larry heck about
It's just
politics.
about bad leadership.
Well, didn't Ian Nethercott tell me once that as far as the population, there's only one too many people in Canada, and his first name is Justin. I'm just leaving it there. It's not starting any trouble.
I'm sorry, he's the production guy just in time.
Yeah.
Moving right along, we've only got a few minutes left, and we get back to the discussion of cars in the future. I'm gonna hit you with a question before I sign my end out, and Ian will close off. But you know, what is, you know, we asked the question, well, one thing better in 2023. What is our biggest risk for next year? I'm going to leave it to Jim to be the last person to answer this question. So Don and anybody else wants to pipe in. Don?
Would you repeat the question? I was actually distracted by Larry talking about how we need good-looking sales guys in the showrooms paying attention to the customers.
Well, thank God Larry didn't get where the rabbit hole Larry normally goes down. What's our biggest what's our biggest risk next year? What's the biggest threat to us?
Complacency.
Yeah, go on.
Doing the same things we've been doing the last 2 years and not learning any lessons from them. I think both everybody would agree with me, Jim and Peter and Tim as well. And you know, we saw it when we were in Las Vegas. The dealers were some of the talks we went to. They're very innovative, and sometimes had very small rooms. Very small amounts of people were paying attention to what was being said. You wondered where were the other people that came 1,500 miles to learn something.
I think they were busy buying a plane. What do you think, Jim?
It's a great idea, actually.
Yeah, well, you know what? And we kept talking about Used Car Week. NADA had Cirrus Airplanes had a booth, and their salespeople were never alone. And other than the fact it's cool to go sit in a plane, I'm sure they sold a few. Yeah. But anyway, Jim, what's our biggest threat?
Yeah, I think going off what Don said, that's probably the number one threat. I'm a marketing person, and doing the same thing in the marketing space has provided diminishing returns year over year. So, you know, getting in front of customers and shouting at them about our product and how great of a deal it is and how great we are doesn't necessarily work any longer. You sort of have to invite them in. So we're doing a lot of opt-in video. We're doing some different things to give them a little bit more sense of empowerment and personalization. And I think that transcends throughout the auto industry. It's just how do we get consumers more involved in the process? And from a marketing perspective, we're behind as an industry from that perspective, but we're moving forward, and that's really the biggest opportunity, I think.
Yeah, you know, it's I agree with you. And actually, I've heard that one of the number one things that happens in a dealership right now is order deposit refunds. Because people have put down deposits in 15 different places. The first person that says you got a car,
That's right.
they go back and nobody's fighting them for the refund because they got somebody else for that car.
Yep.
So Ian, I'll leave it to you to close off.
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting in San Diego. If you haven't visited, definitely do. Watch out for the hidden fees and hot dog fees, but great city. We're looking forward to NADA in Texas. So anyone's going to be there, we're obviously going to be there in person, and we're looking for a place to hang our hat, but I'm sure we'll figure that out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all the input and listening. And of course, I hope you are recovering well from U.S. Thanksgiving for our American friends. And all the best for the new year. We do have 3 more shows coming up as we finish the year. Feel free to take a look at all the videos, including our ambush interviews, which should be up later today from Used Car Week San Diego. There's some great interviews there to check out. And if you are interested in the Navcom document, I did share it in the chat, but if you want a copy of it, just reach out and have yourself a great week and a great day.
If I can pipe up one more thing, sorry.
Yeah.
I'd just like to thank everybody for tuning in. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate you joining us for the first time on the Monday show, and hopefully we can call on you again. And Peter, Tim, Don, thank you. Don, especially for being the official guest today. And then, of course, there's Larry that we're looking at the bathroom in the hotel room or the roof of the car or something. And Larry, you didn't respond to my Facebook post I shared with you about Thanksgiving. Okay.
I've been on the run, my buddy.
There
And they
you
haven't
go.
caught me, so that's a good thing.
There you go. Nice tie.
And a special thanks to Sooner Dad for tuning in from out west.
There you go.
Oh, look at that tie. Rock and roll. All right.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Thank
We're
you.
out.
See you later.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
Peace out.
Peace out.
Thanks for joining us. It was a great show, and follow us anywhere you would like on your favorite podcast, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and of course on our YouTube, or subscribe to our own channel.
That was very animated, guys.
We try.